So if you were advising the current administration and they called and they said, Brent, give us your thumbnail sketch of the world as it relates to the interests of America, the everyday American. That is, what are the hot spots that are obvious? What are the hot spots that, maybe are bubbling? In other words, it's a question of priorities.
Yes.
At a time when it seems as if, at least on the political right, the winds in the sails, that's for you,
right,
of politics are, let's be strong, let's be more lethal than we've ever been.
Yes.
Sparingly.
Yep. But
we have to develop priorities. What would your advice be?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time in the book talking about this. It's the decisive theaters. And a good friend, I've known him for many years, is Bridge Colby. We've had this conversation many times. We don't always agree.
Sure.
But the key thing is, and so I'll pivot a little bit, rather than looking at the flash points, where can we seize the initiative and draw our adversaries to dance to our tune? There are two places in the world, and we have China as the number one, of course. But if we're not careful, and I suffered this during the rebalanced Asia-Pacific as someone that conceptualized and executed that, we can get distracted if we're not careful by what the Russians do in, say, Africa or in Ukraine. So you have to cover those two bases, understanding that the one that's most dangerous that you have to always keep an eye and a hand on is China. But the two decisive theaters where we can draw them to those two adversaries in and actually start to dominate the strategic initiative is the Eastern Mediterranean. So that's the Black Sea, the Eastern Med, so off of Israel, for a lot of reasons. I mean, since October 7th of 23, kind of proves the point, to the northern half of the Red Sea. So this is the Suez Canal, but also doesn't have to go all the way down to the Bab el-Mandeb. That's that very narrow strait down by Yemen. That's one. The Russians worked very hard to keep a base in Syria at the darkest of days in the post-Soviet era. They've just got unceremoniously kicked out of Syria. So they're looking for a new home for their fleet. They are going back to Catherine the Great. They have this fear of being encircled. That's where you keep the Russians focused. Get them out of Latin America, get them out of Africa, make them have to focus in that, their soft underbelly. The Chinese, it's the tail end of the Belt and Road initiatives and everything. So being there also gets the Chinese attention and kind of pushes them back. But where you really, the dragon, you keep tweaking the dragon's tail and keep him from going to Latin America and doing a lot of nefarious things in our backyard, South China Sea, Southeast Asia, all the way back through the Han Dynasty. Bad ideas from the Chinese dynastical kind of frame of mind come from the south. They come in through that porous border. The Chinese there are very pragmatic, very capitalistic in nature for thousands of years. So being there, challenging what the Chinese do in a way that other countries are attracted, and this was the genius of the folks in Trump's first term, the free and open Indo-Pacific framework is extremely attractive, and it'll drive the Chinese crazy. That's where we act. So act in the decisive theaters. There's two, so we can focus, and it'll also be a place in which they cannot ignore. And we draw them into our agenda, not theirs.